Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive where we dive deep into some fascinating philosophical ideas. And today we're tackling a big one, knowledge.
Ah, yes, knowledge. A concept that's deceptively simple on the surface, but trust me, there are layers upon layers of complexity here.
Oh, I believe it. We've got a treasure trove of information to sift through, all from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy's entry on the analysis of knowledge. Buckle up. It's going to be a wild ride.
We're not just talking about any old knowledge, are we? Today it's all about propositional knowledge.
Right. Knowing that stuff, the facts.
Yeah,
Like Vienna is the capital of Austria.
precisely. Knowing that something is the case, not just knowing a person named Vienna, though I suppose that's possible too.
Huh, maybe they live in Austria, who knows? But we're here for those facts, those truths, and how we come to know them. So let's kick things off with this idea of the tripartite analysis, or, as the cool philosophers say, JTB, justified true belief.
The classic JTB, a long-standing attempt to pin down what it means to know something. But as we'll see, it's not without its issues.
Yeah, I'm already sensing some philosophical turbulence ahead.
Yeah.
But okay, for now, let's stick with JTB. It seems pretty straightforward, right? You know something if it's true, you believe it, and you've got good reasons for believing it. Makes sense to me.
On the surface, yes. It has an appealing simplicity. But remember, we're dealing with knowledge here. Nothing is ever quite as simple as it seems.
All right, fair enough. So let's unpack those three conditions, starting with truth. I mean, you can't know something that's false, right?
Well, in principle, yes. A false belief can't be knowledge. But in practice, things get a bit messy. Think about how many times people have held beliefs that turned out to be completely false.
Oh, yeah, all the time. Like, the whole the Earth is flat thing.
Exactly. Or, to take a more recent example, the 2016 U.S. election. The Stanford Encyclopedia mentions this as a case where many people were absolutely certain of an outcome that didn't come to
Right,
pass.
tons of people were convinced Hillary Clinton would win, but,
Yeah.
yeah, well.
And this illustrates a crucial point. Truth exists independently of our beliefs, no matter how strongly we hold them.
And that leads us to some interesting questions about how we use language. The encyclopedia even mentions a philosopher named Hazlitt, who says sometimes we use no even when things are false.
Ah, yes, Hazlitt. He points out that we might say things like, I knew Clinton was going to win, even after the fact. Of course, that wasn't truly knowledge.
More like wishful thinking.
Perhaps, but it highlights the importance of being precise with our language when talking about knowledge. Most philosophers would agree that in those cases, it's really just an expression of strong conviction, not genuine knowledge.
Okay, that makes sense. Moving on to the second condition, belief.
Mm.
Can you even know something without believing it? It seems kind of impossible, right?
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But then the Stanford Encyclopedia throws us this example of Walter, whose house unfortunately burns down.
Oh, poor Walter.
He's standing there amidst the ashes saying, I don't believe it. But does he really disbelieve it?
Right, his house is gone. It's right there.
His actions suggest otherwise. He's probably going to call his insurance company, start the rebuilding process. Deep down, he does believe it.
So it's more like a state of shock. His belief is there, just buried under a mountain of disbelief.
Precisely. But then there's another example, this one involving a history quiz, that really throws a wrench in the whole belief thing.
Oh, yeah. This is the one with Albert, right?
Yes, Albert. He aces this history quiz, getting all the answers right, but insists he was just guessing. He doesn't believe he knows the answers.
He got them right. So does he know it or not? I'm so confused.
Exactly. And this raises a fascinating question. Can you have knowledge without conscious awareness of it? Some philosophers suggest there might be something called tacit belief at play here, where we hold beliefs without realizing it.
Tacit belief. Okay, my brain is officially doing backflips. All right, let's move on to the third and final part of the JTB trifecta, justification. It can't just be random true beliefs floating around in our heads, right? There needs to be a solid reason, some evidence, something backing up that belief.
Absolutely. Justification is what separates a mere true belief from genuine knowledge. It's about having good reasons for what you believe, not just getting lucky.
It's like that classic scenario where a slick lawyer uses fancy rhetoric to persuade a jury, even though the evidence is weak. They might get the right verdict, but
But their belief isn't really earned, right?
exactly. It was manipulation, not genuine justification.
That's a great analogy. And this is where the debate between internalists and externalists comes in. They have some very different ideas about what counts as proper justification.
Ah, yes. The internalists and externalists. It's like a philosophical showdown.
Mm.
So what are the main points of contention here?
Well, internalists are all about what's going on inside your head, your mental states, your reasoning processes. It's all about internal coherence.
Okay, so it's got to make sense to you based on what you're thinking.
Right. Externalists, on the other hand, think that external factors also matter. Like, how did you come to hold that belief? Was it through a reliable process?
So, like, if my belief is based on a scientific study, that's more reliable than, say, reading something on a random website.
Exactly. They might focus on things like perception, testimony, or scientific methods as sources of justification. It's not just about what's going on in your head, but also about how that belief connected to the world.
I see. The big question, is justification an inside job, or does the outside world have a say? That's a pretty deep philosophical divide.
Yeah.
But even if we figure out this whole justification business, there's still a massive hurdle that challenges the entire JTB framework. The Gettier problem.
Yes, the infamous Gettier problem. This is where things get really interesting. It shows us that even when you have all three JTB conditions, true belief, belief, and justification, you can still end up with something that doesn't quite feel like genuine knowledge.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. Tell me more about this Gettier problem.
All right, imagine you're lost in the desert, parched, desperate for water. In the distance, you see what looks like an oasis. Palm trees, shimmering water.
A mirage. Classic desert trickery.
Exactly. You believe there's water there, and you're justified in that belief because you're seeing it with your own eyes. But as you get closer, disappointment. It's just an illusion.
Talk about a letdown. But wait, there's more to this, right? Otherwise, it wouldn't be a problem.
You're sharp. Here's the twist. As you're lamenting your mirage-induced thirst, you stumble upon a hidden spring tucked away under a rock right where that mirage appeared.
No way. So you were right about the water, but for all the wrong reasons.
Precisely. You had a true belief. Water, it was justified. You saw it. But it feels like pure luck.
It's like winning the lottery with a ticket you found on the ground. You're happy, but did you really earn it?
That's a perfect analogy. And that's the essence of the Gettier problem. You can have a justified true belief that just happens to be true by coincidence. And that doesn't sit well with our intuitive understanding of knowledge.
It feels like something's missing. Like there needs to be a stronger connection between your belief and the actual truth of the matter.
You've hit the nail on the head. And that's what philosophers have been wrestling with ever since Edmund Gettier first presented his problem back in 1963. If JTB isn't enough, what is? What does it really take to know something?
Oh man, now I'm dying to know. Guess we'll have to wait for part 2 of this deep dive to find out.
So where were we? Yes, the Gettier problem throwing a wrench into the whole JTB thing. Naturally, philosophers have been trying to come up with some workarounds, some patches for this problem.
I bet they've got some clever solutions up their sleeves. They don't give up easily, those philosophers. So what kind of fixes have they come up with for those pesky Gettier cases?
Well, one attempt is to add a fourth condition to JTB, like a VIP upgrade to make it even more exclusive. It's often called the no false lemmas clause. Basically, it means you can't arrive at a true belief through any false assumptions or inferences.
No false lemmas. Huh?
Yeah.
Sounds pretty reasonable. I mean, in those Gettier examples, there's always some kind of false assumption leading to that accidental knowledge.
Yeah.
So adding this rule, problem solved, right?
It seems that way, doesn't it? But philosophy loves to keep us on our toes. The Stanford Encyclopedia brings up a pretty convincing counterexample involving this guy, James, and, of all things, a robot dog.
A robot dog. Okay, now I'm really curious. This sounds familiar. What was that one again?
So James is walking through a park when he spots what he thinks is a dog. But it turns out to be a super realistic robot dog, like super advanced, indistinguishable from a real dog kind of thing.
So he's got a justified belief based on his perception, but it's ultimately based on a falsehood, the robot dog.
Exactly. And here's the kicker. There happens to be a real dog hiding behind a bush nearby, completely out of sight.
Wait, so his belief there's a dog in the park is actually true. But he believes it because of the robot dog, the false premise.
You got it. So even with no false lemmas, we still end up with a justified true belief that just doesn't seem like real knowledge.
Man, those robot dogs, always messing with our epistemology. But wasn't there another example, something about barns?
Yes, the Barn County case. Now this one's a classic. Imagine a traveler, let's call him Henry, driving through a countryside full of fake barns.
Fake barns, why would anyone? Oh.
Movie set.
You got it. They're just facades built for film. But here's the catch. There's one real barn hidden among all these fakes.
Okay, I'm picturing this landscape with barn fronts everywhere, but nothing behind them. Sneaky.
And as Henry's driving, he sees what looks like a barn and thinks, hey, a barn.
So his belief is true if he happens to be looking at that one real barn.
Well,
And his belief seems justified, right? He's using his normal barn identifying skills.
exactly. But again, it just feels like a lucky guess, not genuine knowledge. He doesn't know about all the fakes, so he's not really basing his belief on the actual situation.
Farm County case strikes again, so no false lemmas isn't foolproof. What else have philosophers tried to fix JTB? There's got to be some other brilliant solutions they've come up with. Well, they've tried incorporating something called modal conditions into the analysis. It's a way to add more depth, more layers to the whole JTB structure. These conditions are all about making sure knowledge is stable, not easily overturned by slight changes in the situation.
Modal conditions.
No,
Making knowledge more robust, you mean?
exactly. One of these conditions is called sensitivity.
Sensitivity. Okay, that's a new one. How does sensitivity relate to knowledge?
The idea is that if your belief were genuinely sensitive to the truth, it would change if the facts were different. So in that desert oasis case, if there wasn't actually water under the rock, your belief would change, right? It wouldn't be sensitive to the actual state of affairs.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Hmm.
So for my belief to be real knowledge, it has to be linked to the truth. It can't just be accidentally true. It has to track the facts. But I'm getting a but vibe here.
You're right to be hesitant. While sensitivity seems like a good idea, it leads to some, should we say, interesting implications. The Stanford Encyclopedia even calls them abominable conjunctions. For instance, if we add sensitivity to JTB, it would mean you could know something simple, like, I have hands.
Everyone knows they have hands. That's basic stuff.
But you wouldn't know that you're not being tricked by an evil demon who's making you think you have hands.
Hold on. So I could know I have hands, but not know that I'm not plugged into some crazy Matrix-style simulation where everything is fake.
That's the implication. It's getting a little too sci-fi for me.
I know, right? I mean, it doesn't seem quite right. If I really know I have hands, shouldn't I also know I'm not being totally deceived about reality?
Precisely. It seems counterintuitive. So sensitivity, while initially appealing, has some downsides. Now, what about safety? That's another modal condition philosophers have proposed.
Okay, safety. So we've got sensitive knowledge and safe knowledge. This is getting complicated.
It's like adding extra layers of security to our knowledge fortress. Safety is basically the flip side of sensitivity. It says that if you believe something, it shouldn't be easy for it to be false. Your belief should be safe from error in nearby possible worlds.
Okay, I think I'm following. So if I know that Paris is the capital of France, it shouldn't be the case that in some other very similar world, Paris isn't the capital. My belief should hold strong in those close-by scenarios.
You got it. The problem is, what counts as nearby? How do we define how similar these possible worlds need to be? And how do we avoid being circular, defining safety in a way that already assumes we know stuff?
Right. We don't want to end up saying, it's true because it's knowledge. That wouldn't get us anywhere. Are there any other modal conditions that philosophers have tried out? I feel like they wouldn't give up that easily.
There's also the relevant alternatives theory. This one says that for something to count as knowledge, you have to eliminate all the reasonable possibilities of being wrong. But once again, we run into the problem of defining what counts as a relevant alternative.
It feels like we're hitting the same wall every time. We try to fix JTB, but new problems pop up. It's making me wonder if we need to rethink this whole analyzing knowledge into separate conditions thing. Maybe we're on the wrong track altogether.
You know, you're not the only one who thinks that. Some philosophers have started questioning this whole project. They argue that maybe knowledge is more fundamental than justification or belief.
Hold on, so you're saying instead of knowledge being built up from things like justification and truth, those things are actually based on knowledge. Now that's a mind bender.
It is. It's called the knowledge-first approach, and it's a relatively recent development in epistemology. It suggests that we might need to completely flip our understanding of how knowledge works.
Wow, that's a big shift. Okay, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Before we jump into the knowledge-first pool, I'm curious about other approaches to knowledge. The Stanford Encyclopedia mentions virtue epistemology, which frames knowledge as a kind of intellectual skill. What's that all about? Sounds intriguing.
Ah, yes. Virtue epistemology. It's a very different way of thinking about knowledge. Instead of dissecting individual beliefs, it focuses on the character and abilities of the person doing the knowing.
Okay, so instead of asking, is this belief justified, we're asking, is this person a reliable knower? I like it. How does that work in practice?
Well, virtue epistemologists like to use this analogy with archery. A skilled archer might hit a lucky shot now and then, but their overall success comes from their training, their ability, their consistent execution.
So with knowledge, it's not just about stumbling upon a true belief. It's about your cognitive abilities, your epistemic virtues, leading you to that truth consistently.
You got it. Just like an archer who reliably hits the bullseye, a virtuous knower forms true beliefs because of their well-honed intellectual skills and habits.
This analogy is really clicking for me. It makes knowledge as a skill so much clearer. But how does virtue epistemology handle those tricky Gettier cases that gave JTB so much trouble?
Good question. In Gettier cases, the person might have a true belief, but it's not a result of their intellectual virtues. It's like the archer closing their eyes and accidentally hitting the target. It's more about luck than skill.
Makes sense. But what about that Barn County case? Remember, Henry sees that one real barn among all the fakes. He's using his usual barn spotting skills, but it still feels like he just got lucky.
That's a good one. It highlights a tricky area even within virtue epistemology. Some virtue epistemologists would say Henry does have knowledge because he's using his typical barn-identifying skills even in that weird environment. Others might disagree, arguing that the environment is so misleading that it's more like a lucky guess, not a true display of his skill.
So even virtue epistemology has some debate about those edge cases where luck sneaks in. Knowledge really is a slippery concept.
It is. But hey, we're making progress. We've seen the limits of JTB, explored virtue epistemology as an alternative, and there's still more to uncover, like the roles of pragmatism in context. Buckle up because things are about to get even more meta.
Okay, so we've gone through the trials and tribulations of JTB, those head-scratching Gettier problems, and even the idea of knowledge as a skill with virtue epistemology.
Oh,
Phew. But you mentioned pragmatism and context, too.
we did.
So where do those fit into all of this? How can pragmatism and context possibly relate to, actually knowing something?
Well, some philosophers argue that the stakes involved, the importance of getting things right, can actually affect whether we genuinely know something. They call this pragmatic encroachment.
Pragmatic encroachment. Okay, that's a new one.
The idea is that the practical consequences of being wrong can influence what we consider knowledge.
So are we saying that my knowledge can change depending on how much I care about being right? That seems a little strange, doesn't it?
It might seem strange, but let me give you an example from Jason Stanley's work. Imagine you're going to the bank to deposit your paycheck. In one scenario, it's a casual errand. No big rush, no urgent bills to pay.
Okay, low-stakes situation.
Right. You remember going to the bank on a Saturday a couple of weeks ago, and you confidently tell your friend, I know the bank will be open tomorrow. But now imagine a different situation. Rent is due, your account is almost empty, and you absolutely need to deposit that paycheck before tomorrow.
Ooh, yeah, high stakes.
Now, even though you have the same memory of the bank being open on a Saturday, you hesitate. You start to doubt.
Suddenly, it's not so certain anymore, huh?
Exactly. The consequences of being wrong are much higher, so that knowledge feels less secure, even though the evidence is the same.
That's really interesting. So is this pragmatic encroachment idea saying that what counts as knowledge can change based on how important it is to be right?
That's the gist of it. It's not just about having the right belief, it's also about the context in which that belief is held.
Wow. So context matters. This is getting pretty deep.
And it gets even more complex when we consider contextualism.
Contextualism. Another idiom to add to our collection. What's that all about?
Contextualism is the view that the word know itself can change meaning depending on the context.
Wait, so you're saying no is like one of those words with multiple definitions?
In a way, yes. Think about the word tall. Tall means something different if we're talking about skyscrapers versus, say, houseplants.
Right. Context matters. So what we consider knowing something could shift depending on who's talking, what's at stake, and the overall situation.
Exactly. In casual conversation, we might use know pretty loosely. But in a courtroom or a scientific paper, the standards for knowledge are much higher. Contextualists argue that the word know is sensitive to these different situations.
So we've got pragmatic encroachment, where the stakes change our knowledge, and contextualism, where the word know itself changes meaning. My brain is doing somersaults.
Yeah.
It's amazing how something as seemingly basic as knowing can be so philosophically complex.
It is, isn't it? And that's part of what makes philosophy so fascinating. The more we examine these fundamental concepts, the more nuanced they become.
We started with this seemingly straightforward three-part definition, JTB, and now we're down this rabbit hole of different theories and challenges and all these new perspectives on knowledge. So where do we even go from here? What are the main takeaways from all of this?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that knowledge is much richer and more complex than we might initially think. JTB is a good starting point, but it's not the whole story.
We saw how attempts to fix JTB can lead to new problems, and then there are these completely different approaches, like virtue epistemology, that change our whole perspective on knowledge.
And on top of that, we have pragmatism and contextualism adding even more layers of complexity. It's not just about having a belief, it's about justification, context, reliability, and maybe even a bit of intellectual virtue.
It's a lot to wrap your head around, but honestly, it's been an incredibly insightful journey. Knowledge may be slippery, but it sure is fascinating.
Absolutely. It's a journey that's been going on for centuries, and it's still unfolding.
Well said. A huge thanks to our expert for navigating us through this fascinating and challenging terrain. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into knowledge. Keep those brains buzzing.